I remember just the room was just electric.
It was just an escalation of
It's unrecreatable.
It was just phenomenal.
Every PlayStation fan has that one E3 reveal that sticks with them. The Electronic Entertainment Expo, to give the full name on its passport, was where the biggest publishers in the world hawk their shiniest wares. It's where we saw the then impossibly detailed faces of 2005's Killzone, where The Last Guardian's Trico set us up for the inevitable heartbreak, and where, in 2015, the world was about to watch the demo that would unleash the true power of PlayStation 4.
This 2015 was just at that period of time, a year or two after launch, where the first games which had been really built just for PlayStation 4 were coming along. And that was the big promise of Uncharted 4 anyway, was this the first one made for this new machine? And like the buzz was, what's it going to be, you know, what are they going to be, what is Naughty Dog, the best studio in the world, many people think, going to be able to do with this new machine?
As PlayStation Access took their seats at the Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena, they couldn't have predicted the parade of marvels about to play out.
It was an amazing conference for PlayStation. Just big hit after big hit after big hit.
I was sat next to Rob and he like lost his stuff at Final Fantasy VII Remastered. Like as soon as the music started, he was just like, oh my God. Then I had got really like emotional about Shenmue 3 being announced.
And there was time for just one more thing.
A small title which requires no introduction.
I remember that the room went very dark, and for like a longer period of time than you expect, the anticipation is just ramping. I remember people in the room just, without anything else to do, just start whooping with excitement. There was just black screens with only on PlayStation written at the bottom, which is always a good sign.
You're just looking for anything recognizable. And in retrospect, this starts with like a statue of a pirate's face, and it's like obviously Uncharted, but you just, in the room, you just don't want to, and first of all, you don't want to like overcommit. You're in a room full of like video game aficionados, and if you're like, it's Uncharted, it's like, everybody's like, it's Assassin's Creed, you idiots! So you don't want to go too soon.
The rumble goes round, but no one, it can be sure until the Naughty Dog logo comes on stage. Like the whole arena just erupts into cheers.
It started with Drake and Sully opening the door of the church, and the first thing you see is like this explosion of sunlight. And that was a very, I think, a good decision by Naughty Dog to be like, okay, so you got Drake and Sully opening this door. There's that sense of anticipation naturally there. It's like, what's going to be on the other side of this door? And it's this beautifully lit scene in this street in Madagascar.
No sooner had Drake nudged his way through the crowd, he is ambushed. And Naughty Dog began to Naughty Dog, and Naughty Dog hard.
It's one of those perfect things for E3 because there's so many cool little bits, so many nerdy little bits that I was like, oh, look at the way that pile of fruit has fallen off that stand. And as Drake and Sully start getting attacked by the baddies, like there's this shootout that happens in the marketplace, and the crowd of civilians like disperse and scream and run away, and it's sort of in that classic Uncharted style where it feels chaotic and it feels like everything's going and exploding all at once.
He hides behind some grain sacks, and as they get shot, they deflate. And you're just kind of like, again, what world are we in where the developer has taken the time to make a mechanic where the grain sacks deflate as they get shot?
Then a big old truck comes barging in and starts shooting at Sully and Nathan Drake, and it's not letting up. It's being adamant that it's going to get them. You've got people coming in, your opposition, with other guns, and you have a little bit of a gun brawl in a market. It's very exciting. The truck is not letting up. Every time you think you can go, they run into a building, and then you're like, oh, okay, like normally Nathan Drake, this is where you can cover, and you have a couple of enemies. No, that truck comes barging in the wall.
Now, this alone would have impressed, but the beauty of this demo, and the level in the final game, is the way it kept growing and squeezing more tricks out of the PS4.
They're running over the roofs and they're heading towards this Jeep, and I'm expecting a cutscene then. Like, okay, well, they're going to get into the Jeep, then we're going to be into a cutscene, or maybe there'll be like an on-rails kind of a moment where there's some shooting or something like that. Obviously, Drake gets into the driver's seat, which was like, oh, okay, Like if it's going to be on-rail shooting, I wouldn't have expected him to be in the driving seat, but he gets in the driving seat. I was waiting, just waiting for that change in the camera to see, like, this is a cutscene now, this is a cutscene now, and it just never came. I remember another massive eruption of applause because that's not what anyone expected to see.
All of a sudden, Drake and Sully are driving this truck through these streets with this absolute monster of a tank. Well, sort of like a tank chasing them with a Gatling gun on top of it. And again, it's like an elevated version of that. Oh my God, where do I go? Where do I go? And at the last minute, you see where you're supposed to go.
Crashing into fences and markets, and you're hitting the wall with all these wooden construction planks and things like that. It was so high in energy and so intense and insane.
Stuff's flying all over the place. It's like an absolute technical showcase.
It kind of blows past that level of what is Uncharted should be showing us on PlayStation 4, and it just becomes like you've just been battered by it. You're just like, well, this is like ridiculous. Like, how have they done this?
They spot Sam. He's off in the distance. I think now here's the cutscene. We're going to stop here, or something's going to happen, but we're still driving. Before it would have been kind of windy roads. Now we're in these more open plains.
He gets out a blooming hook, and then he's going to attach himself onto another truck.
It launches Drake out of his vehicle, and he sort of smashes into I think it's like a piece of corrugated iron that's going across this bridge, and that's where the demo at E3 ended. And it was like, bang, Uncharted 4, and everyone was like, oh, standing up and applauding.
I remember being so excited, and just that, that fast action pace, and then to cut it at that moment when you're so hooked in it, it left me so excited.
It felt like an incredibly special moment to witness. We were just buzzing afterwards.
The whole audience was just like the entire time.
The amazing thing is, the demo didn't stop there. There was more to be seen behind closed doors, instantly becoming the hottest ticket of E3 2015.
Don't make me talk about the behind the scenes bit. The behind the scenes demo scenario still makes me feel bitter to this day.
Obviously, I'm the person who doesn't shut up about Uncharted, so it was very important for me to go and see this extremely limited, behind closed doors, extended bit of gameplay, and I think the rest of the team were fine with it. And actually, I think Rob managed to crib his way in. I'm not sure how. I'm Robert Pearson, don't you know?
I remember being in a right old strop and going off in a sulk.
Rob and I, we can be professional about this. At least, we are brothers in not seeing the demo together. When suddenly,
the PR poked his head round and was like, oh, Rob, there's an extra space. You can come and look. So I wasn't actually even supposed to see it, but I managed to sneak in.
As I recall, he just said to Rob, we've got another space. Would you like to come in? I'm stood there like, am I invisible?
And it was in this extended demo the true scope of Uncharted 4 began to reveal itself.
And I remember thinking oh my God, they are actually playing it live, because it was, there were little tiny subtle differences from what we'd seen on stage. There was, a few little different routes that were taken. I remember thinking at the time, wow, it's not just the way that you drive that truck down that hill. It's not just like one path. There are multiple paths you could take. And that was one of the things for me that I was thinking, okay, this is what Uncharted 4 is doing that is, above and beyond what we've seen before.
The extended E3 demo was shown online a few weeks later, putting us and Dave out of our misery. But in that E3 booth, it was a private glimpse of an astonishing future.
It's like, these are the highlights of my career that I think about all the time, and the actual gameplay that they showed, because there's a cliffhanger. There was he hit that bit of the bridge, and I wanted, we were all like, ah.
And then the convoy chase happens. And Nathan and I were both just sort of sat there speechless throughout this entire sequence. The first thing that happens, I remember very distinctly, is that Drake gets dragged along the floor. He's clinging onto this rope that's attached to the truck, and he's getting dragged through the mud. And I remember thinking, that's the best mud I've ever seen in a video game. Uncharted, it's done water, it's done fire, it's done sand, it's done snow, and now it's doing mud. This is the best mud I've ever seen.
Everybody at E3 was talking about that gameplay demo. Everybody wanted to see what happened when Drake hits that scaffolding. Everybody, there was another 10 minutes of gameplay or whatever, and I really desperately wanted to know. And Rob got to find out. It feels so unfair. So yeah, thanks for reminding me.
It would be a little while before we got to chase after Sam for ourselves. Just under a year later, we were sitting down to play Uncharted 4 on the 10th of May 2016. It delivered on that promise and much, much more. But we'll always have a special place for that demo. In a year that saw us whooping at Horizon Zero Dawn, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Shenmue 3, Dreams and Hitman, this breathless downhill rush felt like the final piece of the PlayStation 4 puzzle.
We were just so excited to talk about that show and that moment. Like, what an incredible moment. It just felt like video game history for sure. It was fantastic.
I've been privileged enough to see some really cool things at E3. This stands out for me as like probably the most sort of blown away by something technical that I've ever seen at like an E3 showcase.
If I had to describe this scene in one word, it would be phenomenal. Like it just covered everything. It covered the characters' relationships, it covered action, it covered the adventure and the locations you'll explore, the idea that, you know, you've got dialogues depending on situations. It was just phenomenal.
I would love to speak to the people at Naughty Dog who actually made this happen, because it must have been a nightmare to actually pull off. Like, how they've managed to do it, I still don't know. Like, you know, it must have been so difficult to pull off. It must have been iterated on so many times, like getting everything right to make it feel like you actually have some agency in this situation, whilst making sure that the outcome is always the one that is supposed to happen. I've never done it the same way, basically. So yeah, if I had to describe it in one word, impossible is the word I would use.
PlayStation